Hi everyone, hope you're doing good. Welcome back to another episode of my What If Scenario series. In this episode, we're going to be looking at what if Dave Mustaine stayed in Metallica. Now, this is the 5th episode in the series. You can go check out the playlist if you've missed any episodes. And also, this will tie in with my Metallica 40 series, which you can also check out on the channel. Now, not many people actually know that Dave Mustaine was even in Metallica because he wasn't really in the band for that long. And that's why I thought I'd do this what if scenario, just to see what would happen if he stayed in the band, if he never got fired. Yeah, this is actually an idea I've had for quite a while. One of the very first ideas I had when I come up with this series. So yeah, let's get straight into it. But before we do, if you're new and you like the content I've been making, please consider dropping a subscribe and checking out the other playlists on the channel. Please share with anyone you think that might like this and my other content. Go drop a like if you go on to like the video. All comments and feedback much appreciated. And lastly, a huge thank you to everyone who's been watching and commenting and already subscribed. Massively appreciated. Now let's just get straight into this video. So we're going to start like we always do with the original timeline. So back in 1983, Metallica fired Dave Mustaine because of his drug and alcohol abuse and also his violent behaviour. Just before they were about to start the recording sessions for their debut album. The band didn't want his bad influence in the band, so they sent him back to LA with absolutely nothing. The band then went on to appoint Kirk Hammett from his band Exodus to replace Dave Mustaine, and then they went on to release their debut album, and the rest is history. As for Dave, he went on to form Megadeth with his next door neighbour Dave Ellefson in 1983, releasing their debut album in 1985, Killing Is My Business. He had the ambition and the drive to play heavier and faster than Metallica and be more successful than them, and that began a very long rivalry with the band, which was later put to rest. And then the rest is history. We know the rest. Now we're going to go through our alternate timeline, starting at 1983, where the band noticed Dave's problems were getting worse. They become very concerned as they wanted to start recording their first album, and Dave was in no shape to perform. Plus his actions wasn't very good for their image. Instead of firing him, however, I think they would offer to help him, give him a second chance. They tell him to change his ways or they'll fire him. Dave was incredibly shocked by this, but he respected them and he decided to get the help that he really needed. He was a hothead and a bit arrogant, but he was also very caring towards his bandmates, as they were the closest thing he had to a proper family. That's why I think they would try and help him, and he would accept that. He would come back a completely different person and a much better person. After this, they record and release Kill 'Em All, and I think it would be almost exactly the same as it was in real life. Dave Mustaine had a huge part in the writing of that album. He had 4 writing credits, so I think the majority of it would be exactly the same. Even the solos, as Kirk played them how Dave played them pretty much. 1984, they released Ride the Lightning. Again, it would sound very similar, as Dave had 2 writing credits in real life. I think a lot of the riffs he wrote for Killing Is My Business would be used for this album. Fade to Black would be a bit different sounding, and the soloing would be a bit different, as Dave's style was a little bit different to Kirk's. 1986, now they release Master of Puppets to great acclaim, as in real life. Once again, the sound I'd say would be pretty similar. With Dave having more input on the music, I think some of the riffs would sound a bit more like Peace Sells style. And also, yeah, some of the songs would be a little different at the same time. However, Cliff Burton would still get killed in that bus tour accident, and the band would be left devastated, but nobody more than Dave, because I think him and Cliff would get on really close. They would have a real close relationship during their time in Metallica. Dave would really struggle after his passing. He might even go back to his old habits and his old problems that almost got him fired. He might even go through a phase where he thinks he might not be able to be in Metallica without Cliff. However, after the funeral and when Metallica appoint Jason Newsted from Flotsam and Jetsam to be on bass, I think Dave would decide to carry on, and he would do that in the name of Cliff. In 1988, they released Justice for All, and I don't think it would be as progressive as it was in real life. I think Dave would use riffs that he would use on So Far So Good, So What. Also, Dave would write In My Darkest Hour in tribute to Cliff in one sitting. I think that would replace To Live Is To Die on the album, or you possibly put the two songs together and have it as the ultimate Cliff tribute song. The album would be a huge success for them and they would go on a massive world tour. Now moving on to 1991, the band would appoint Bob Rock to produce their new album like they did in real life, but I don't think Dave would be too happy with it. I don't think he would like it to start with. They wouldn't get on very well as he didn't like the power that Bob Rock would have over the music. They go on to release the Black Album, and I think it would almost be as successful as it was in real life. With Dave's influence, I think it would be a little more thrashy than in real life. There'd be a mix of the Black Album, a bit of Rust in Peace in there, maybe a bit of Countdown to Extinction as well in there, sort of a mix of all of them. I don't think it would sell as many as it did in real life, but I still think it would be a very successful album, and it would do them very well. During the making of the album, Dave would have had his reservations whether it was going to work out, but after the massive success of the album, I think him and Bob would probably make a bit of amends, and he'd be alright, he'd stay with them after that. And then after that, they went on a massive world tour, and James would still have his pyrotechnic accident, which would put back their next album a couple of years. In 1996, they released Load, but the band would write a lot of material and they would release a double album like in real life, so Reload in 97. I think both albums would sound similar once again, but also with Dave's writing would add more of a Countdown to Extinction, maybe a Euthanasia style to the music. I don't think Dave would be too happy with the direction they're going in, but the success that it was bringing them was more than he could ever imagine. So I think for that reason, I think he would probably stay with the band. His solo work would always come through strongly on these albums as well. He was getting a lot of input with the music because he was writing some great songs, some great riffs. So yeah, they would go on a pretty big tour after this, but tensions was stirring in the band. So in 2001, Jason would leave the band after disagreements with James and Lars. After this, tensions really rose in the band, even more than in real life, because as I said before, Dave is relatively more hot-headed than Kirk, so things could really have got out of control around this time. You know, at this point I was kind of a bit stuck whether to do, like, would they sort it out and stay together? Would they split up? Would they let tempers flare massively and have a massive fallout? But in the end I went with this. I think Dave would look at his bandmates and the situation they're in, and they would just think to himself, how has this happened? But as I said before, he can be more hot-headed than Kirk, but also I think he would have been a bit more assertive than Kirk, as in real life Kirk didn't really do anything about it at that point. I think he'd be really assertive towards James and Lars. He'd do his best to try and keep them together and try and sort it out, because he wouldn't want to see his best friends and his band be destroyed. So I think he would be the one to step up and sort things out. He would want to help them like they helped him all them years ago. James and Lars would receive the help they needed. They managed to put things right relatively quick, and they would stay together, I think. All because of Dave Mustaine really putting them both together and go, come on, we can sort this out. And yeah, I think they would. After this, they would appoint Rob Trujillo, formerly of Suicidal Tendencies, and Ozzy Osbourne on bass, and they'd work on their new album. In 2003, they released Saint Anger. It wouldn't sound anywhere near the same as it did in real life. I think it would be more thrashy, and it would be back towards their old sound. I think it would sound a bit more like Death Magnetic and World Needs a Hero put together. Dave's riffing and solos would be fantastic. Yeah, I think there'd be solos on this other than in real life. Yeah, I think the fans would really like this, and they'd be back on the right path. It would give them a lot of motivation to carry on as a band. You know, if they could come through those issues together, then they can do anything, and they were closer and even better than they were before. And after this, Bob Rock would make way for Rick Rubin to produce their next album. At 2008 to present day, they would release Death Magnetic in 2008. This again would sound very similar, but I think it would have a lot of United Abominations and Endgame vibes to the songs. Yeah, this would be very much liked by the fans, with Dave showing his worth with some great songs and great leads. After this, I think they would release 2 more albums in the same style, playing many long tours and keeping up the same lineup, because why would they want to change when it's all working well for them? And yeah, I think it would stay like this up until present day. However, that would beg the question, what happened to Kirk Hammett? I think he and Gary Holt would stay in Exodus and make it their own. Riffs used on some of the early Metallica albums would now be used in Exodus songs. They would be very much a part of the big four of thrash, as Megadeth was obviously never created. I think there wouldn't be a massive feud or rivalry between Mustaine and Hammett like there was in real life, because Kirk would never have taken Dave's job as a Metallica guitarist. I think there'd be a massive respect between the two, being two of the greatest guitarists in thrash metal. And I think over their career, I think they would tour a lot together. I think it'd be really, really cool. So now I'm just going to end with my final thoughts on this whole thing. It was really, really interesting making this one, because even though not a lot of the timeline actually changed, but the whole music landscape would have changed massively. Quite obviously, if Dave Mustaine stayed in Metallica, there wouldn't have been any Megadeth, and that's huge because Megadeth are a massive band in metal. And Kirk would obviously have stayed in Exodus as well. I'm honestly not sure what I would prefer, because I really like Megadeth. But this version of Metallica could have been better than Metallica and Megadeth in real life put together. I also believe that Kirk's Exodus could have been better than the real life Exodus. Although saying that, I am happy with what we got in real life, even though Dave wasn't. I think the only downside is that we wouldn't have had 2 bands made from the split between Dave Mustaine and Metallica, but we would have had one absolutely brilliant ultimate Metallica and a really, really awesome Exodus as well. And for me, I think that's just brilliant. So that was my fanfic for What If Dave Mustaine Stayed in Metallica. I'd love to know what you thought of it. If you would have preferred this Metallica than the real life Metallica, and also would you have preferred Kirk's Exodus to the real life Exodus, driven by mainly Gary Holt? Is there anything you would have done differently in this fanfic? As I say, I really, really loved writing this one. It was really, really great to write this one. I've got more rock and metal and guitar content coming up. Metallica 40 series, I've got some other stuff coming out, but it's coming to an end very soon. I haven't got that much things to do with that. But for what ifs, I've got loads more lined up in the future that we can do. Yeah, if you made it this far, thanks ever so much for watching, and until the next one, keep it metal.